All right, welcome into another day of our daily Devos in the Psalms. Pastor Rick here, and we are jumping in today to Psalm 114. It's titled God's Deliverance of Israel. I do not have a new hat on today. I have worn this one before, but it's a cool one. Miami Giants from way back. And so if you have ever heard of this team, drop it in the comments what league they played in. I'd be very curious if anybody out there, obviously you all have the Google on your side, so you could always Google it. But before you Google it, just like the video and maybe share it with a friend. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. That'd be super fun. So, all right, so let's just jump into Psalm 114. God's deliverance of Israel. I think you're going to enjoy this one. It's kind of a short one, so who knows? Maybe we'll get out of here before lunchtime, and you can go ahead and get something to eat. So hopefully you're not too hungry, but we're gonna power through, folks. We're gonna power through. So, verse 1: When Israel came out of Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people who spoke a foreign language. Again, just going back to Israel stuck in Egypt for over 400 years, slavery, forced labor, making bricks without straw. They had it going on, folks. So it's no wonder they were upset with God, when they were in the wilderness and had no water to drink. And they're like, man, I wish we could go back to Egypt where we just had pots of meat sitting around. It's like you were slaves, like they were beating you. And yet somehow when trouble comes and you're frustrated and you don't think God's doing what you think you should be doing, you glorify the slavery of your past and you turn it into like thoughts of grandeur and luxury and like ease of life. It's crazy what we do sometimes when we are really committed to our previous patterns of sin. But anyways, that's not even really the point here in this this chapter. I was just going off on just the great thought in my head. So it's my head. It's a scary place to be, okay? But no, when Israel came out of Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people who spoke a foreign language, Judah became his sanctuary and Israel his dominion. Speaking of God choosing to make his people his sanctuary, the place where he's going to dwell in the world. Like it's almost like the nation of Israel was almost like a portal to some extent of the presence of God, because God was making himself known, was revealing himself through the people of Israel. Like you could just see by just looking at them, something's different about them. Something interesting is going on there. And yet they lived lives where they very quickly forgot many of the things God had done for them. And it's really hard to look like judgmentally towards them, because I mean, if you're really honest and you take a look at your own life and you just think, wow, I definitely don't live consistently, with what God has done for me, the way he has revealed himself to me. I haven't lived consistently to that. And so, who am I to judge, what the Israelites did? Really, it's better for me to just look at it, not from a judgmental, looking down upon, condescending kind of look, but to really ask myself, what of these characteristics do I see in my life? And what do I need to change? So a good question for us to ask ourselves. What do you see in Israel's behavior when it comes to seeking God, not seeking God, remembering what he did for us? So now let's keep reading. So because God is his Judah has become God's sanctuary and Israel his dominion. The sea looked and fled. The Jordan turned back. So just some poetic language to talk about the Red Sea and the Jordan River. They crossed over both of these bodies of water. Crazy things happened in each situation. Different things, but both crazy things. And then it talks about the mountains skipped like rams and the hills like lambs. And so you've got some poetic language talking about the power of God that shakes even the very earth. The mountains and the hills are shaking at the very sound of God's voice, essentially. Why was it sea that you fled, Jordan that you turned back, mountains that you skipped like rams, hills like lambs? Because they're thinking back to the days of sitting in front of the big Mount Sinai. Moses goes up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, and there's cloud over the top of the mountain. There's lightning and thunder and shaking. So when they're talking about the hills and the mountains skipping like rams and like lambs, it's not like pretty stuff. No, it's like conjuring up, visions of the past, right? That their dad, their grandpa, their great grandpa has spent time passing along to them in an oral culture. They're passing it along orally to make sure that they know the history. And this song actually would have been one of those tools to help them remember the past of what God had done for them, what he had saved them out of. And so tremble, earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of God, of the God of Jacob. And they remember the shaking of the ground that would happen when they were in front of Mount Sinai waiting for Moses to return. Potentially even remembering the golden calf that they built, the party that they threw worshiping a fake God. So they're remembering the greatness and the magnificence of God, probably also then reminding themselves of their brokenness and their failings, of their ancestors, really. So then hopefully it can put them in a place where they don't make that same mistake again. So it's really good for us when we think about our past, when we think about those that have gone before us, is to not overly glorify who they were, but to recognize both the grandiose faithfulness and power of God in their lives, but also recognize some of the mistakes, some of the brokenness of the past, so that it can actually be avoided and not repeated. And so the last part is, who turned the rock into a pool and the flint into a spring. Speaking of Massa and Meribah, and where God brought water out of the rock 2 different times. The rock was hit the first time. The rock was supposed to be spoken to the second time. Moses hit the rock both times. Moses got into a little bit of trouble for that. He blamed it a little bit on the people because they made him angry. So this whole psalm is to bring you through the history of what God has done for his people, the miracles that he's worked, the waters that he's parted, so that you bring the proper adoration, thanksgiving, faith and confidence and boldness and courage before the Lord. Because when we trust him, we're able to walk courageously. We're able to not back down when our circumstances get a little too intense. We have a great God. We have a great God that makes the mountains skip like rams and the hills like lambs, that brings water out of a stinking rock, where there's no chance. There's no opportunity for water to come from that place, and yet it happens. He's the God that removes immovable obstacles. You got the crazy Egyptian army behind you and the Red Sea in front of you, and there is no options, no choices. The cloud goes behind you and separates you from the Egyptians so they can't kill you. And next thing you know, the Red Sea is just parted, dry ground in the middle where there should be practically quicksand mud, Man, God is awesome. Like, stir yourself up today a little. Like, that's how big God is. That's how good he is. And put that up against whatever you're facing, whatever you've been through, and know that God is working mightily on your behalf. So I hope you're encouraged today. God bless you tons, and I'll see you tomorrow.